Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. We have a great activist guest this evening. We'll be interviewing John Dvorak of Boston, Massachusetts. He has been the founder of the Cannabis Curriculum and Hempology.org, a longtime activist who I haven't met in person before, but this is our opportunity. But first, as we always do, stay tuned and we'll bring on our infamous dancing cannabis leaves.
I feel the force.
If you are a loved one or looking for help finding a doctor who can help you get a medical marijuana card anywhere across the United States, we have compassionate doctors we can refer you to in your community. So give us a call at 503-235-4606. That's 503-235-4606. You know, for many decades, we have done a hemp news segment. In fact, this is show number 1200. So we've been doing this show since October of 1996, coming up on 29 years and counting. So I've often done hemp news, but in this day and age, there are many more resources for hemp news out there, so I don't do it nearly as much. But it is worth noting that it is August is the 88th anniversary of marijuana prohibition. We've had 90 years of lies, and I think you'll agree it's time for those to end. And even though marijuana has been made legal in more than half the population's residents, the DEA seized over 5 million cannabis plants last year and arrested nearly 6,000 marijuana arrests. And so things continue to develop, but you know, marijuana use by youth and kids has gone down, continues to decline. So we always said that would happen against our counter critics. But without further ado, let's continue to our interview and help us restore hemp. Good night. So I would like to introduce John Dvorak, who is a longtime activist in Massachusetts with the Cannabis Curriculum and Hempology.org. And your history precedes that back in the cannabis movement. But welcome to our show, John. It's great to finally have you on.
Thank you, Paul. It's great to be here. And it's great. I just want to say thank you and thank you and Teresa for all your years and years of hard work, dedication, selfless contributions to cannabis, marijuana, hemp, and the worldwide community. You have made such a positive difference, and it's a true honor for me to be here today with you.
Well, thank you, John. I'll try not to let that go to my head here, you know, but I've been doing it a long time, and I've had a few wild horses try to drag me away, and I'm still here standing where so many of our friends and compatriots are not. In fact, just this past week, our friend Richard Lee, who I only met briefly. I know one thing, you and I have not met in person before, so it's an honor to have you here on the show. I've been following your work for decades. But Richard Lee of Oaksterdam, originally of Houston, Texas, but out of Oakland, California for a number of years, has just passed away. And he spearheaded the second Prop 19 in 2010 to legalize marijuana, which since the 80s was the first bill to make a statewide vote on legalizing marijuana. one before that was in Oregon in 1986, and before that in California in 1972. And ironically, the initiative in 1972 was also Prop 19. So then in 2010, Richard Lee mainly was the financer of putting marijuana legalization. And they lost that vote, but they pushed the envelope forward, as he did in starting all the different groups he started. So we have to just spare a moment for the memory of our compatriot in arms and spirit. Though we didn't really spend much time together, we worked on it from our own locales, as have you and I. So,
Right. Yep. Richard did so much. And he was in Houston, as you mentioned, with the hemp store in Houston, I believe. And he did a little bit of work with Hemp Magazine, which I was involved with in the late 90s also. So he did a lot before he even went to California. And
yeah.
Was an amazing person.
I also was born in Houston, but I don't remember it, of course. I grew up in Dallas till I was about 15, and then North Carolina through my teenage years, Asheville, North Carolina. So,
Nice.
but how did you first get involved with hemp? We often ask people what drew them in. Is there any like first cannabis experience you want to share?
Right. Well, I grew up in Fort Worth actually, and
Wow.
but I moved to Boston in '87, so
Okay.
I'm technically a
You're a
masshole.
Texan too.
Yeah, but I'm a masshole, and I've been here long enough to
Never
qualify
heard that.
for that. And but I've been smoking marijuana for 45 years, and as you know, in Texas, it was a lot more conservative down there, so
Yeah.
it was not as much fun, so to speak, smoking marijuana as it is up here in Boston, where it's a little bit more liberal. But I in 1990, after when I was around 30 years old, I finally realized that I wanted to do more to help out. And that's when I joined Mask Hand Normal in Boston and started working with the Freedom Rallies. And
Uh-huh.
so
Tell our
started,
audience about the Freedom Rallies, because a lot of West Coast people aren't knowledgeable about the Boston Freedom Rally. I say it's akin to the Seattle Hip Fest in
right.
terms of the scale and the longevity of this event.
It is. It's big. Sometimes some years we would have 30 to 40,000 people. It used to be a 1 day event, then they expanded it to a weekend, but I think it may be 1 or 2 days this year. It's in September of every year on the Boston Common, the historic Boston Common, which is really great. The first Freedom Rally, though, was at the Charlestown Navy Yard, where the USS Constitution is stationed. And Jack Herer spoke at that, and that was where they kicked off the Freedom Rallies, but then they moved them to the Boston Common, where they've been every year since. And this year, this September, we're having another one. It's we've had some great speakers over the years, and back in the '90s, the Boston police used to just show up in force and arrest, a couple hundred people just for possessing marijuana.
I understand the head of Normal, Keith Stropp, was busted there smoking a joint one time.
I believe he was. I don't know if
Yeah.
he served any time, but I'm sure they hassled him. And our president, Bill Downing, who's another person who unfortunately just passed away recently. In 1998, they had undercover policemen in the crowd at the Common, busting people. So Bill found out about this, and he got a rubber pig nose and started walking around following these undercover cops and oinking with a pig nose on. And so they arrested him, actually.
Did they beat him up?
They arrested him, put him in the tent for 15, 20 minutes. They didn't process him, or they didn't officially arrest him, and they let him go. And he went right back out with his pig nose and started oinking again, because it's not illegal to oink. But that just shows
Not
you
yet.
yeah, not yet. that just shows you the spirit of Bill Downing. And he was our leader for years and years. He had so much integrity and humor and dedication to cannabis, just like we do. And it's a really just a sad, sad day when people like that and like Richard Lee pass away. They've contributed so much more. The world is a darker place now that they're gone, but because they were here, the world is a much brighter place in general because of all the positive things they've done and all the patients, especially patients they've helped and people that they've either gotten out of jail, out of prison, or prevented from being arrested in the first place. Now that marijuana is legal in many states and they don't arrest near as many people, even though it's not federally legal, and they are still arresting people for marijuana. So our job's not over. We still have a lot to do on that front, and that's for sure.
So you have, do you still market hemp products?
I've actually never really sold
Oh,
anything.
okay.
I'm more of a collector, a researcher. I'm a
Uh-huh.
self proclaimed hempologist. I call myself hempologist because I study hemp, I study cannabis. I've been collecting books, documents, artifacts. I have over 200 PDFs of historic hemp and cannabis documents, original, books that have been scanned into PDFs that are out on hempology.org, which is my main website. And but I don't sell anything. I give my talks. I don't charge for them. I prefer to give back to the community, give back, and try to help people out. And as far as I want to go back to the Boston Freedom Rally, including in addition to Bill Downing, we've had a lot of great speakers over the years, including Elvie Musica, who's I know she's a good friend of yours.
She is a good friend.
Nora Callahan of the November Coalition. She did a lot for helping prison people get out of prison. Dennis Perone, another fallen hero. Don Wertschafter, who is the godfather, one of the godfathers of the hemp movement, who really helped me. Chris Conrad.
He has the Cannabis Museum in Athens, Ohio, and he's helped me a lot too.
That's right.
Especially through my corporate takeover experience or about 9 years ago.
Yes, yes. So if you're in Athens, Ohio, go visit Don Wertschafter and his Cannabis Hemp Museum. He's got a lot of hemp artifacts as well as a lot of medicinal cannabis bottles. That's just an amazing collection of cannabis bottles. That
I've sold him a lot of mine.
Oh, good.
My kids aren't into it, but he's bought literally several hundred of mine. Some of my best ones, but that's okay. Like I said, he it's a good thing to have go into something long term, like we hope that museum will be.
Yes, and I hope to donate some of my things one of these days. Chris Conrad and Mickey Norris, another first couple of cannabis, like you and Teresa, who've done so much over so many years. They've been to the Boston Freedom Rally. Kevin Zeiss, another person who passed away, unfortunately. Diane Fornbacher, Keith Stropp, the head of Normal, Joy Beckerman, Dr. Uma. I don't know if you know Dr. Uma.
I know of her. I don't really know her, but I know her. Is she there in the Boston area? Or
yes, she is in Atlanta. She goes back and forth between Boston and Atlanta, but she's an amazing person. And John Sinclair was there one year, and David Peel was there one year. He actually stayed with my wife Pam and I. We hosted David Peel for the weekend, and that was a lot of fun. Yeah, he was a character, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And I want to mention that the Freedom Rally was obviously a marijuana event, people smoking marijuana, being socially, fighting the power, fighting the system, but also John Napoli of the Hempist. There is a hemp store on Newberry Street in Boston. John Napoli ran the Hempist, he still runs the Hempist. He always had a booth at the Freedom Rally, and several times they had really nice fashion shows of, hemp clothing during the Freedom Rally. So he was always educating people throughout all the years. And, we accomplished a lot. We legalized marijuana. The law is not perfect. We have a long way to go. There's still way too much red tape. And, but, we're getting there, and we got there, and we're going forward. There's a lot more to do.
Indeed, indeed. So I understand you went over to the Cannabis Cup when it first started in '96. I think LV Masika was the honorary judge at that first one. That was a high time for them.
It was high times event, and I went over there with Don Wertschafter. I helped him out at the Ohio Hempery booth, and also I was editor of Hemp Magazine at the time with Richard Tom Collar. I don't know if you know him, but he was the founder of Hemp Magazine, and he's in Houston. And we never physically met, but we put out this magazine, Hemp Magazine, 50,000 copies a month.
Wow.
Just doing it remotely. I would collect articles, edit them, email them to him, and he would put the magazine together. 50,000 copies a month would be distributed to stores, hemp stores all across the country for free, give outs. And so that was a really.
I remember seeing those, but I did not know the history behind them. I mean, it's time I looked at them, but I didn't commit to memory what the organization behind that was. But it was a great periodical.
Yeah, well, I'm very proud to have worked on that for 2 or 3 years, and but that got me to Amsterdam for the Cannabis Cup, which was just amazing because, and again, this is another cannabis event, obviously, but there was a hemp expo at the Cannabis Cup, so there were a bunch of hemp companies, including Wertschafter from the Ohio Hempery, Finn and Alan Dronkers with Hemp Flax, which is a Holland-based company.
Yeah, I've had the honor of spending some time with them. They're both, at the top of the industry when it comes to hemp in the world.
Yes, yeah, the Dronkers are amazing.
With Hemp Flax.
Hemp Flax, and if any
Hemp
of our
Flax provides the hemp for the euro note. Most of the world's currency is 70% hemp and 30% cotton, and he provides the hemp for that. He provides hemp for the German auto industry and several tobacco paper industries. Many people don't realize that by law, all tobacco cigarettes have to be rolled in either hemp or flax. And here in the United States, it's about 50-50.
Wow, that's amazing. That's a lot of hemp.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
And it comes
Dronkers.
from a pulp mill in Spain, and it's converted into cigarette papers by Kimberly Clark there in New Jersey, and a couple different mills down in North Carolina.
Wow. But the hemp expo at the Cannabis Cup was a lot of fun. Mitch Kahn had a company called Headcase. He was making hemp hats. Ethan Jewell with Lost Harvest. Etienne Fontaine, I think you may know him. He's a California long-term activist. He was there, and Larry Dupree was a Canadian hempster. But we all got, everybody was there. This was sort of kicking off what I call the modern hemp industry. Basically, it was started in the 90s thanks to Jack Hare and his touchstone book, Emperor Wears No Clothes. And I know that you were involved in getting the hemp industry going in the 90s also.
I do, Jack. I met him in '82 in Los Angeles. I stayed at his partner's head shop for about a month. It was Captain Ed Adair. And as I was leaving town to go back to Evergreen State College, Ed said, "You got to meet my partner, Jack." So I met him there at his head shop just off Van Nuys Boulevard in the valley, so to speak. And he next time I saw him was in Oregon when we both moved to Oregon to work on the Oregon legalization petition in 1984.
Wow.
But in '85, he needed a place to put together the very first edition of his book. That time he had 3 little children, all of them under the age between 6 and 3, CC, River, and BJ. And
Yeah.
back in 84 and 85, no one had a home publishing system. The first
Right.
Commodore computers and Texas Instrument computers were out there. There's no software for the general public to lay out things yet.
Right.
And so cut and paste meant scissors and glue. And so he asked, because his little children were getting in all the little clippings he had, if he could come to my house. We were both growing pot about 3 blocks away from each other to support the legalization movement in Oregon, I can now say. In fact, they even recorded Jack Herer trimming at my house in 1986 on a police body wire. But he came to my house and took over my house, which had the pot basement in the basement. About 2 months, him and a lady named Carol Lee and a guy named Bryce, they had helped him put it together on that first edition. But that led me to investigate and find that China had the world's largest hemp crop. I found a lot of information at the Portland State University Library. I just went to the compilations that Congress had put out of all the correspondence of Jefferson, Washington, and Franklin when their 200th birthday passed, which now was, more than 200 years ago, or maybe it was their. Anyway, there were these multi-volume sets of each of their works, and all of them came with an index. So I just went to the index and looked up hemp and Indian hemp and found a lot of things that became most of the last chapter of Chris Conrad's first book, Hemp Lifeline to the Future.
Right.
But I gave it to Jack. Yeah.
Yeah. So Jack, he really did kickstart the whole hemp industry, the modern hemp industry. And Chris Conrad was there at the beginning. Don Wertschafter, as we've mentioned, the Bronner, Michael and David Bronner with Dr. Bronner soap. They adding hemp seed oil to the soap. They're one of the main, they're drivers behind the marijuana legalization effort and the hemp
they provided
industry.
some funding.
Yeah, they've done so much. Rob Youngman it was Monash Tash back then, but now it's Young Maven. So he's still producing hemp clothing under the Young Maven label. Barbara Philippone and Summer Star. I know you know them. They've been around forever, and they're still kicking. Sean Patrick.
Enviro Textiles. If you want hemp cloth, their clothing, they're one of the best in the country to go to.
Right.
Enviro Hemp Textiles in Glenwood Springs, Colorado.
They're the best. Lawrence Serban, he's out in California. You can get hemp fabric from him also, as well as any number of hemp products. Lawrence sells through Hemp Traders, through the Hemp Trader Company.
I got to interview him.
You what? Oh,
I got to interview him now. You're giving me a whole list of potential future shows here.
Yeah,
John, I appreciate that.
Lawrence is awesome. Rob Clark, who's an international cannabis researcher and author. He's written so much and done so much. Jerry Shapiro with the Merry Hempsters, with the lip balm.
I know him. He's here in Oregon.
Yeah, and salves. I love his salves. It's amazing. He would always send me sample lip balms for my traveling hemp museum. When I would give talks, I would give out free samples. He would give me samples. Dr. Bronner's always sent me samples. John Rulak with Nutiva, he would always send me samples. Carolyn, and then other people, Ruth Shamai up in Canada, that produced hemp foods. Dave Serber, who unfortunately passed away, he had the Hemp Shield product.
Yeah, Dave Saber. I knew him real well
Saber.
too. He and William Conde back in, they were both Eugene, Oregon people. In the early 90s, they took hemp fiber to the Wood Science Laboratory in Pullman, Washington. And they studied hemp fiber there and said that it makes a composite that is as hard as steel. And now we're seeing those commercial applications with hemp wood in Kentucky and hemp board in Colorado, where it's actually commercially available now.
Exactly. Ahead
But I
of their
think
time.
this company making hemp shield, making hemp seed, wood protected and even hemp protected now, fiberboard protected, is still going.
Right. Yeah. And that's an amazing product and another amazing use of the hemp seed. You know, we know it's great superfood, but it's also good for industrial uses like paints and stains. We
Ink.
had a lot. Sorry.
You can make ink. Ink is another one that
Oh,
hemp
really?
ink is.
Oh,
Yeah,
nice.
you can make hemp instead of soy-based ink. You can anything soy or especially flax. Flax and hemp, both their seed oil, their protein, their fiber, are very, very similar. But hemp's much more productive.
And a lot of it's biodegradable. It's a lot better for
Yeah.
the environment.
Yeah.
So in the 90s, 1998 is when they legalized hemp cultivation in Canada. That's how much further ahead of us they were. So a lot of Canadian hempsters were really important, like Greg Harriet with Hempola, Sean Crew with Hemp Oil Canada, Ruth Shamai, as I mentioned earlier, doing hemp foods, Larry Dupree. And so we learned a lot from those Canadians, and we still are learning a lot.
Yeah.
But
I remember the very first hemp food I saw was the Mama Indica Seedy Sweeties. And I think that came out of Vancouver from Chris Bennett. But then we had Hungry Bear Hemp Foods, our friend Todd Delata here in Oregon, that then started making something very similar.
And Todd's a great guy. He's
Yeah, he is. He's doing stuff in North Carolina now, Western North Carolina, kind of my old stomping grounds when
that's funny, yeah.
paternal family's from there.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
And Mary Kane, who produced the Hemp World magazine and the Hemp Pages, that was so important for getting the word out there and letting people know about hemp. And Carolyn Moran, who's also in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah.
She had a hemp paper.
I worked with her at first, just as I was selling hemp paper, and she kind of tagged along. We worked with the guy who was importing hemp fiber from Spain for those paper mills back in the early 90s.
Really?
Yeah, yeah. Frank Demichio, I think was his name.
Yeah. Well, I love Carolyn. She's a wonderful person and
She's been putting out Talking Leaves, which is an environmental publication out of Eugene for a long, long time.
So this is what I call the modern hemp history. You know, all these people, some of these companies, they're still doing it. You know, Sean House with Hempsels in Pennsylvania, he's still producing those healthy, tasty hemp pretzels. Hempsels.
Yeah,
so,
they are good. I got to order some. Now that you reminded me, I haven't had any in years.
And he's got all sorts of other hemp products too online. And Eric Steenstra was worked with the Hemp Industries Association and Vote Hemp, which is a very important lobbying group. And and
so did you work with the HIA and Vote Hemp as well?
Yes, I was a member. Well, I still am a member of the HIA, Hemp Industries Association, and Candy Penn was one of our early leaders, and she's done so much for hemp.
Really? I've never heard of her.
Candy Penn, yeah, she's great. But back then, as I'm sure you remember, there's a lot of discussion about separating the rope from the dope, you know, because it's like it's not marijuana, even though a lot of these people that we just talked about all smoked marijuana and they believed in all uses of the plant. They weren't just 100% hemp. But if you're going to lobby Congress, you know, you had to sort of clean up a little bit, and you couldn't just go in your tie dye and smelling like marijuana. But so that was a big.
I did that too with my tree-free eco paper company. You had to say hemp isn't psychoactive at all. But we didn't know about all the different cannabinoids in all cannabis plants, like CBG, the mother cannabinoid that all the other cannabinoids start from, and CBD and THCA, and they're finding new ones every day.
Right. Yeah, no, it's amazing. And if you discover a new cannabinoid, you get to name it. So you
Yeah.
could, like naming a star, you could name it like, I want to name it after Dr. Grinspoon or somebody like that. You could THG, tetrahydrocannabinol Grinspoon or something
Well,
like
being
that.
there in Massachusetts, you must have seen him some frequently at events.
I did meet him a couple times. He was an amazing man, and talk about strong. You know, he really he pushed the envelope when it
He
came
did. I
to
met him
cannabis.
a couple times at normal events, and he testified via video at one of my suppression hearings, and we won that suppression hearing in a criminal marijuana federal case. And in the end, it was a jury nullification decision. So I was very lucky in that regard back
Wow.
in. You can find out more if you search for How Fija Saved My Life, and you might find it that way. How Fija Saved My Life. I'll tell you more than I can go into. But we were talking about the Hemp Industry Association. What are they? Can you give any report on how they're doing today? A couple times I've been to events, and it's been the National Industrial Hemp Council that has been the primary driving force. And I've seen Eric Steenstra there with Vote Hemp a couple of times, but it seems like I haven't seen them as much lately in terms of the Hemp Industry Association, the HIA.
You're right, and I don't have an update on that. Unfortunately, I'm not actively involved with them right now, but I don't get emails or any kind of notifications about them. So I'm really not sure what's going on with them. But there are other national hemp groups. But I did want to mention also back in 1998, the Santa Cruz Hemp Festival. I don't know. I don't know if you went to that or not, but I don't
think I did in 98. I think that by that time I wasn't making money I had 3 little kids that are now young adults, and I wasn't making money. So I kind of quit selling hemp paper as a full-time occupation in 98 and didn't really get my medical marijuana clinic business going until 99 and 2000. I went back to school and did some work toward my MBA, which I never got, but I used my veterans benefits to attend school instead.
But the good thing, the Santa Cruz Hemp Festival was a really great event in a convention center. A lot of vendors, and Paul Galon helped organize the festival, but he also put out a documentary called Hemp Hooray that you can Google. It's on YouTube it, and so you can watch that documentary of the hemp industry back in the late 90s. So if anybody wants to catch up on that, that's a good way to do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I can see why you have the cannabis curriculum, John. You have near encyclopedic knowledge of all of these events and people, many of whom I'm not familiar with, but I really appreciate that. And so I know one of the things you worked on and you have on your hempology site is the decline and fall of hemp. Is that about the historical decline and fall, or maybe the overproduction we had there at first in 96 when Canada opened? That's what we've seen, and it's kind of the inevitable economic thing. When hemp became legal here in the United States and in Canada, all kinds of people started growing it, not knowing what they're doing. And so inevitably, the vast majority of those people just wasted their crop because they didn't have a place to sell it. They didn't know how to process it. Some farmers lost their livelihood and committed suicide, unfortunately. But you see, when hemp becomes legal, a big spike, and then economic reality sets in, and there's inevitably kind of an economic fall, and then a slow build up. And now we're we're getting up in here in the United States, I believe, to the build up with these new products like hemp wood and hemp board and hemp
Yes,
cream and
yes,
hemp tensils, the hemp plastic products that are now
right.
coming out. And soon to
Finally,
be hopefully textiles. I mean, I hear
yes,
Levi's going to start using hemp, and Adidas has been making hemp shoes for years.
yes, they have. No, you're right. And I think that's similar to the whole CBD glut too, right? When everybody
That was part of it.
jumped in, started growing CBD like crazy, and then there was too much, and then the price crashed. But my
Yeah,
decline
people
and
didn't know how
fall,
to harvest it. It's a whole
right?
separate thing, curing and harvesting cannabis flowers.
Yes,
So much of it just molds very quickly if you don't know what you're doing.
right. And the problem, you're right, with the hemp industry, because the whole infrastructure is not there to process the fiber, to process the plant. So people were growing a lot of acres, but they couldn't sell it because nobody could process it. And that's sort of this whole chicken and egg problem we have with the hemp industry, as far as we have to, build the infrastructure. It's sort of like building an airplane while you're flying it. We're growing the crop and building the infrastructure at the same time, and building the demand, because farmers aren't going to grow a crop unless there's demand for that product. So it's a very difficult juggling act, which, like you say, it is. Some of the pieces are falling together with all these new and improved products. But the decline and fall that I was referencing in my outline had to do with the 1800s, back in the historic decline and fall of hemp. Because, and there's no denying that in the 16 and 1700s, cannabis hemp was one of the most important plants on the planet, because the rope and the sails for the sailing ships was so important for
And
commerce,
the oakum.
trade.
Can't
Yep.
forget the oakum that kept the ocean out between the boards.
Yeah, oakum, yeah, which is old rope that they would pull apart and then use that as caulking. So, the sailing ships that were so important for exploration, trade, and warfare were all
Inside.
kitted out with cannabis hemp. And so it was very, very important. But in the early 1800s, the demand for true hemp, which is what they used to call cannabis hemp, true hemp, declined because of the cotton gin, because of steamships that lessened the demand for rope and sails, and because of other natural fibers like sisal, jute, manila hemp. All these were imported fibers at much cheaper prices than cannabis hemp. So by the 1850s, even though they did try to create a hemp industry in Kentucky in the 1800s, and it was very successful, but it peaked in 1850. And you see these roadside Kentucky signs, about hemp in Kentucky. And they mention on there that the production peaked in 1850, and that they were only growing around 200,000 acres of hemp at that time. That sounds like a lot, 200,000 acres, but when you consider the millions of acres of other crops like corn, wheat, rice, hemp was really a minor crop even in the 1800s. And by 1900, they were only growing a few hundred or even a few thousand acres of hemp in the entire
Yeah.
country. So
A
cannabis
lot of
hemp,
the production shifted to Wisconsin and Minnesota. I know
it did. Yes,
Ben Mazzell, another great
yes.
late activist out of Wisconsin, he highlighted a lot of those hemp industries in his region.
Yeah, I love Ben. I met him at the 2001 Normal convention in DC, and yeah, he was a character too. But
Yeah. He
the
was on Richard Nixon's enemies list when he was 19.
really, oh, good for
Yeah.
him.
Yeah.
Wow, I'm proud of him.
And a chess champion.
Wow,
He was
did
quite a
not know
character.
that.
And a Yippie activist. I met him through the Yippies. I was kind of involved with them. And having met Dana Beal and gone to the White House smoke in. So I was kind of
Nice,
radicalized there,
I bet.
you know.
So, as I've mentioned, in hemp cultivation in America was basically dead by 1900. And one of the other reasons for this is because it was limited uses. They were only using it for twine, rope, some caulking, and some cheap bagging. They weren't using it for building materials, or they didn't even realize how that hemp seed was like this new superfood. So you hear a lot about how there was this big conspiracy about hemp was this big threat to the oil industry and the timber industries in the 30s. And that's why they made it illegal. But I believe hemp basically died out on its own in the early 1900s. And then marijuana, reefer madness kicked in. They made marijuana illegal as a social control, which is very well documented. There's no arguing that they harassed blacks and Hispanics by making marijuana illegal, and they just sort of swept hemp under the rug with marijuana because it is cannabis after all. So they were like, you can't smoke marijuana. Oh, well, you can't grow hemp either. And they were only growing a few thousand acres of it at the time, so there weren't a lot of farmers to protest it. So that is my summary, brief summary of the
Well, I think,
declining.
we had the banker Morgan, who became the Treasury Secretary and remained the Treasury Secretary for about 15 years. And I know he spearheaded changing the composition of our banknotes from 70% hemp, 30% cotton to 70% flax and 30% cotton, which it remains today. But those little pins they run across banknotes to determine whether it's the right kind of paper or not,
Right.
those don't differentiate between 70% hemp or 70% flax. It's the same result. But it was him that also tried to, and he had huge interests in the petrochemical industry.
Right.
And so I think they saw, as the article in Popular Science pointed out, and how Mr. Schlittigan, who invented one of the first hemp decorticators, just
Right.
disappeared from history. I think they saw that hemp could make a big resurgence, and some people wanted that to happen. Even Henry Ford, and they continued that campaign, and marijuana just played right into that.
Yep.
Especially with anti-Hispanic racism. People didn't realize when they were voting John Bonham, when the AMA lobbyist Woodward testified against criminalizing, prohibiting, putting the big tax on marijuana in 37, the AMA came in and opposed that. And John Bonham, who was the Speaker of the House for several decades, probably longer than anyone else out of Texas, he didn't even realize that cannabis, that what they were prohibiting, marijuana, was what he grew on his farm for his underwear.
Right.
So it was that level of using that term marijuana allowed them to really make it, and the whole reefer madness campaign allowed them to really prohibit it. There's no doubt.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But it had declined. It had declined enormously in importance with the mechanization, especially of the cotton industry. I went to school in China, so I learned a lot about hemp in China. And when I first went there, the people, most of those Mao suits were made of hemp, and it wrinkles a lot like linen. And that's what the Chinese people would complain about hemp fabric that they had to wear before the age of Deng Xiaoping in the 80s, when cotton became common and synthetic fibers, is that, hemp is old fashioned and it wrinkles too easily. One of the things that I just have to mention here that very few people realize is that the name that the Chinese people call their country is the Middle Country, or Zhongguo, the Middle Country. But up until 500 years ago, they did not call it the Middle Country. It was the Manchurians and the Qing dynasty who conquered. Before that, it was the country of mulberry and hemp, and that was actually the name of their country. I won't go into more Chinese stuff right now, but it was the name of China up until about 500 years ago.
Wow. That's very interesting.
The hemp and mulberry country. Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Yeah. So What happened with Hemp History Week in 2011? I see that in some notes I have here.
Oh,
I know you.
well, yeah. The Hemp Industries Association had Hemp History Week, back in 2010 through 2012 or so. And I sponsored a few events and held, some get-togethers at local universities, hemp history weeks, where we would I would talk about Boston hemp history, and there's a woman that created a musical called the Caitlin County Hemp Wars. We had someone come in and sing a few songs from that. And it was just an effort to educate people about the history of hemp and to get them more involved with the Hemp Industries Association. And so I was working with that. But one of the main things I did starting in 2007 was create the cannabis curriculum, because I really thought that, or I still think that students in school really should study cannabis. There's so many different topics. It really doesn't matter what class you're in. You could write a paper or do a report. You could base it on cannabis, marijuana, hemp, the drug war, prohibition. There's so many different topics. So I put together like a 33 slide deck covering a bunch of different topics to give them the ability to turn reefer madness into reefer gladness. Because you actually don't even have to be in school to be part of the cannabis curriculum, because I'm learning things about cannabis and about hemp every day. There's still more and more. So you just have to be a student of life to enjoy the cannabis curriculum. And I have several slides about, like food and construction, the building industry, all the environmental benefits of hemp, the body care products. And when you look at NCBD, and when you look at this, that's why I started calling hemp the green buffalo, because indigenous people of this continent use the buffalo to survive. They use the entire animal, hair, snoot, balls, and all. And in a similar way, you can use the entire cannabis plant to make food.
And now Native Americans have picked up on that. I know a fellow who's made a documentary called The Green Buffalo.
Right. Yeah. I'm glad to see that. Yep.
Yeah.
Because it really it fits, it works, because you can use cannabis to make food, fuel, building materials, clothing, energy, medicine.
Tell our audience about hemp graphite and hemp batteries. Tell us what you can about those topics.
I know that there's someone in upstate New York, I believe, that was doing some research into turning the bast fibers into a substitute for graphite, and so that they could be used in batteries, in supercapacitors, in power systems, which would just be an amazing advancement if we could use
I read an article.
Renewable. Yep.
I read this article a couple of years ago about a former Ever-Ready battery factory in Wisconsin that was changing to a hemp graphite battery company. Now, I haven't heard about any products out of there yet, but that was something in the news. You never know. I also read about hemp being made into fabric at several locations in Texas, and that never hasn't come to pass yet anyway. But, there's a lot of plans, and it takes a lot of energy, sustained effort, and persistence to carry through on these things, not to mention luck in finding the financial wherewithal if you don't have it already.
And in my opinion, we have to take cannabis, we have to deschedule cannabis and marijuana. I know they, quote, legalized hemp several years ago, but they put such a ridiculous the definition of hemp is cannabis with less than 0.3% THC, which this hamstrings the farmers.
So many farmers get something that becomes 0.4% or less than half of 1%. They have to destroy their crop, which is a tragedy for farmers.
That's called hot hemp. And these kind of stupid, illogical laws and rules. That's what I call a catch 422. It's our government's way of putting all these barriers in front of us. It's like in the medical area, they say, well, there's no research proving cannabis is safe and effective, which is not true, but they say that. And then people say, well, can I do research? And they say no. And they say, well, why not? And they say, because there is no research. So this whole circular logic is really jerking patients around, and that's what I would call a classic catch 422 example. Along with the definition of hemp, the people are afraid to come out of the cannabis closet because there's this stigmata associated with marijuana use, and there's just such
Oh yeah,
it's
still
such
there.
brainwashing.
Yeah,
And
I
and
mean,
when you look at the dispensaries, no tax, they can't deduct taxes. They don't have access to the banking system and capital. They can't process credit cards. What they're stacking the entire deck against us, and yet there's dispensaries
taxes at the top tax rate.
everywhere. Yeah, I mean it would be a great tax uh,
Be
source
great
for them.
if our entrepreneurial companies had free access to financial markets and capital without regard to the drug laws, which are just a
Right.
means of controlling them. We'd be so much better off. I know you were also interviewed for a movie, One Plant. When
Yes,
did
sir.
that come out? What can you tell us about that film?
That is a documentary that I have not seen yet. It's coming out this year.
Oh,
Hopefully, it's going to be on Netflix, but
Mhm.
it is a feature-length documentary that explores all aspects of the cannabis plant, including its history, which I speak to. But they also go in and talk to a lot of people about hemp concrete and medical marijuana and the politics of cannabis. So I haven't seen it yet, but there's a Kickstarter campaign where they raised enough money to finally produce it, and I know it's in post-production right now. And so look for it. I want your listeners to be out there and look for it
I'm
and
going to be
watch it.
looking for it. Tell me about the Manhattan project and the
Yes, sir.
Kansas City hip-friendly project.
Yep.
I'm looking at your art here.
Sure. The Manhattan project. I just wanted to mention quickly that in addition to collecting information, I've been doing a lot of writing
Mhm.
over the years. I've written for Hemp Magazine, as we talked about, and had articles published in Hemp World, Hemp Times, which was a spin-off of High Times,
Yeah.
Journal of Industrial Hemp, MarijuanaNews.com, Thousand Watts Magazine, Hemp Lifestyle Magazine, West Coast Leaf, which you're probably familiar with, which is Chris and Mickey's
Mickey Conrad's book.
publication.
Yeah, Mickey Moore.
And Ladybug magazine, which Diane Fornbacher put out online a few years ago. But one of the articles I wrote was called the Manhattan Project, which is a takeoff on the Manhattan Project during World War II, where they developed the nuclear bomb. The government decided to go all in on this project to develop, to create a nuclear weapon. I think it's executive order number 420. Our president or a president, I don't know if this one will do it, they need to write an executive order where we dedicate the resources to fully utilize the entire cannabis plant. They need to have a hemp friendly cabinet. And I created a list of cabinet members of a lot of leading activists of the day. So that's basically the Manhattan Project. In Kansas City, which is a takeoff on Kansas City. It's a bad takeoff, but this is another article I wrote. It's a living community set on 420 acres, of course, entirely cannabis evolved. All the buildings are made out of hemp. The vehicles run on hemp biodiesel. Cannabis medicines are used everywhere, and it's just my pipe dream, so to speak, of what I think we should have, and I'm looking for a cannabis-friendly retirement home. Hopefully, in a few years, there will be such a thing where we will be able to go and retire and enjoy cannabis safely and without being hassled. But that's the basis of Kansas City, is just going into all the different aspects of a living community that's entirely cannabis based.
That's a great idea. What if our government put money into that instead of whatever it's going to today? War, war, war. That seems to
Oh,
be all of our money goes more. I understand that the defense budget for the first time just passed $1 trillion annually.
yeah,
So,
that's insane.
yeah, it
You're
is.
right.
It is. It's
You're right.
like, how
We need-
quickly can we give money to rich people to build stuff that we should never be able to use? You know, but
Absolutely.
well, we're
Yeah.
almost out of time here, John. Let's
Okay.
remind our audience about your website. And first of all, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to touch on?
Well, one thing I don't know if you recognize this, is a 1913 USDA yearbook. It's got a 60-page article on hemp.
Wow.
And I have a few extra copies of this that I like to give to people that are interested in hemp. I don't know if you probably have a copy.
I don't have one of those, so I'm going to
Oh.
buy one from you.
I'll send you one.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely. But also, if any of your listeners are very, into hemp, especially hemp history, you contact me at hempology.org. My email's at the website, and I'll send you a copy of the 1913 USDA yearbook. It's almost as old as I am.
Wow,
So,
that's great.
yeah, good. I'm glad.
We'll see if you're overwhelmed with responses here.
I hope so. That would be nice.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you don't have one. I'm glad I'll be able to send you one.
There was a like 1913 again. The reason that jogged my memory, Funk and Wagnall's dictionary. And when
Yeah.
you look up hemp, right there next to it, there is a term for a habituate of hemp. Do you know what that word is?
Habituate?
A hemp habituate is a hempie. So
Really?
before the hippies, right there in the dictionary, they defined hippie as a habituate of hemp.
Nice.
So we know where that other term comes from now.
Excellent. No, it's been great
Okay.
talking to you, Paul.
It's been my pleasure. So go to Hempology and reach out to John. You can find his email there, hempology.org, right?
Yes, sir.
Well, I appreciate your lifetime of work, sir, and I know it's a mutual admiration society. So I hope someday we'll get together. Someday someone in Massachusetts will ask me to come out there and do something. I'm always willing to travel to give the first 25,000 years of hemp presentation.
Right.
And if you can make that happen, I'll be there, man.
Absolutely.
But I want you to keep up the good work and work to restore hemp.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, John. It's been great.